Welcome to the Birth Lounge. Now let's talk all things birth with your host, Andrew Davey. This podcast is brought to you by iBirth Professionals.
Okay, everyone, welcome episode 8. I'm with the amazing Kasey Biggar from a little place that you may have heard of, a place that I'm actually from as well, in Perth, Western Australia, or Bunbury, actually, a beautiful part of the world. Really blessed that she said yes to this because there's so much wisdom to tap into. And she's doing amazing things. She really is a force for good in the birthing world. So I'm really keen to learn, Kasey, a little bit about your story and what brought you into that world and maybe some of the things you're up to now. But Kasey, welcome.
Oh, thanks, Andrew. Thank you. And you know that Bunbury is the second city in WA, so it's not a tiny little town anymore.
Yeah, I was just saying before, we used to holiday there as a kid. It was a tiny little place, but yeah, now it's a satellite city proven.
Oh, thriving metropolis, some would say.
Yeah. I love the Australian sarcasm. Nobody gets that anymore. So, Kasey, love to start. I really guess I wanted to be a conversation. I don't know what this is about. And even you said yes to something you didn't know what was about. That's the coolest part.
You want to chat? I'll chat.
Absolutely. I saw you got your tea there as well. So maybe we'd love to start, a little bit about who you are and, what brought you into the world that you now play in the world of birth.
Yeah, sure. So from Bunbury. I wouldn't say born and bred. I was actually born in Perth, but my parents moved down here when I was about 5. Did all my schooling here, and then I always knew I wanted to be a nurse. I think someone planted the seed in my brain, probably when I was about 10, and said you'd make a great nurse. So the rest was history. So I did my nursing at ECU, and then moved to Perth, and I was devastated I had to leave Bunbury. I couldn't believe I was leaving. Why on earth would I want to go? I had all my friends here. I had everything I needed, or this is what I thought. So went to Perth, and obviously that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because then my whole world opened up, and had my nursing career there, met my husband, did a ton of traveling. So my background is emergency nursing. We ended up living in London, where I worked at King's College Hospital in London, which is the biggest trauma hospital there in the UK, and it was phenomenal. Just an amazing experience to be a part of. And we moved back to Perth, and I had this dream that I would join the Royal Flying Doctor Service, and part of the requirement for that is that you have critical care experience, which I had tons of, but that you also had to be a midwife. Because obviously anything can happen in those remote communities, and certainly up in the air. So I went ahead and did my mid. And it wasn't just that, it was my grandmother who had continuously told her friends that I was a midwife when I wasn't a midwife, but she thought that I was going to be a midwife. So she told them that anyway. And I mean, she was a phenomenal lady. To do something to make her proud is something that was worthwhile doing. So she got polio when she got first married, and fortunately we don't see polio anymore because of vaccinations, but on a horrific disease. And I think so important to bring to the forefront now, especially with what's happening with COVID, that immunisations do make a difference. And so we live in a society where we don't see polio anymore, but I certainly grew up with my grandma, who had lost all movement in her right arm and her left leg, and she lost sisters. They were in iron lungs at Royal Perth Hospital. Back in the incredible history. And this is the strongest woman that I know. And she lived on a farm and was told she couldn't have kids, and then miraculously got pregnant with my dad. And simple things like carrying a child around on your hip, she couldn't do, because of course she was severely disabled from polio. Not cognitively, incredibly sharp woman, but physically. So she would tell me stories about, holding my dad's clothes in her teeth, and she'd kind of drag herself along with her good arm, and she'd, pull him along with her teeth. And that's how she'd move around with him. She'd tell me stories about, she'd do everything. She'd knit. She'd just tuck a knitting needle under her arm, and away she'd go with her mouth and her other hand. And She was sewing one day and the needle went straight through her good finger. And so she just had to sit there for 8 hours. She just had to sit there and wait for the men to come back from the farm that day to take her hand out because she had no way to release it. And another story where she was, you know, watering a garden. She just kind of propped herself up on her good legs so she could stand and water. And then she kind of rolled down the hill a little bit. She'd fallen over and that's it. She just laid there with this water pouring over her for another 8 hours until they all, like, just the strongest woman I know. Anyway, so she tells me I'm going to be a midwife. So, you know, what choice did I have really to go and do it? So did my mid-training. I did my mid-training at King Eddie's, which is our high-risk hospital here. And I felt a little bit disillusioned about what birth was. I hadn't had kids myself yet, but it certainly, it didn't inspire what I thought it would inspire in me. And that left me feeling a little bit empty. But one night I was up on the ward and it was an evening or night shift, I think it was. And I got a call from the family birth centre. And at the family birth centre, it's, you know, kind of like a little independent birthing unit. Feels like the women are birthing at home, but it's still connected to the hospital. So it's, you know, that kind of space in between. And often they'll just have the midwife looking after the woman and her partner down there. So they made the call for the second midwife. Obviously birth was imminent. So rolled on down and this woman is asleep in the water. And I was like, oh, okay. And I look at my watch and I think, yeah, normally you just call us right before birth because we're busy up on the ward as well. It's not, you know, we don't just have someone take over our workload for us. But I sit quietly and I just flick through the lady's notes and I see that she's a premix, so she's a first-time mum as well. And I think, geez, this is really not the traditional behaviour of a first-time mum. And then I see she's an Indian woman, and Indian women culturally typically are very vocal in labour, and there's nothing wrong with that. They're very vocal in labour, and this woman was not being vocal at all. And I think, oh, there's something strange going on here. And next thing I know, this head's crowning, and I think, holy hell, what has happened? This woman's actually birthing and she breathes this baby out and then brings it up to her chest, and I am absolutely floored. I have no idea what's just gone on. Anyway, eventually we get her into her bed and get her all settled in, and I say, what was that? Was that Scientology? Not that I understand Scientology at all, but that's just what came to mind. What kind of magic was that? I don't understand what I've just witnessed. And she said, I did hypnobirthing. And I was absolutely blown away. And I'd heard the term, they'd mentioned it at uni, but I hadn't really invested much, interest into it. I didn't know anything about it. And it was probably a couple of weeks later, I was still working on the postnatal ward. I went down to get a woman from theatre. She had had a cesarean. And when I brought her back to the room, over the course of the day, you build a rapport with her and then you start debriefing her about her birth. She'd had an extensively long labour. She'd had every intervention you could think of, and then she'd resulted in a cesarean section. And most women need debriefing after that birth. They're a bit traumatised. But I wasn't debriefing with her at all. I was celebrating her birth. And what is going on here? Why? And she is so positive about her birth. She was so positive about making decisions and the way she laboured at home and the support she had from her partner and her midwife and the obstetrician and, being involved in making those choices and knowing that, eventually she decided to have an epidural because the labour wasn't progressing. So she was comfortable that was the right decision for her. And she also knew that that would increase her risk of cesarean section. So when she went for a cesarean section, she was very comfortable that was the way her birth was going to go. And she was really, really okay. And I thought, and then she told me she'd done hypnobirthing, and that was what helped that mindset. And I just couldn't get over it, because how amazing for those breathe them out in water babies, but so much more important for when birth doesn't go according to plan. And no one's got a crystal ball when it comes to birth. And there's so much birth trauma out there. And there's, these women in their 60s and 70s still talking about how awful their birth was. And imagine making a difference right from the very beginning. Imagine women who potentially could have had a traumatic experience, or someone would have perceived it as a traumatic experience, then thinking of it as, no, I was the strongest woman. Sure, I had highs and lows, but really look how strong I was. Look what I managed to achieve. And so I was sold then. I had to go and find out what this hypnobirthing was about. So did all my research, and there are so many great programs out there, all, you know, focused on having a positive experience. But I really honed in on Hypnobirthing Australia, and I honed in on that because it's Australian, so isn't it great to be able to promote something that's homegrown, but also that has its values and its teachings on our care systems here. So I love that. And then I loved that it wasn't husband and wife teams, because that's not how teams come anymore. Women have their, you know, sisters or aunties, or, you know, their partners can be male, can be female, all sorts of support. It comes in all different shapes and sizes. So I really loved that the whole program was the birthing woman and her support partner. So that kind of fit everyone in to that description. I also loved that it was evidence-based. So, you know, having a science degree, I have a science-based brain. I love that it was constantly updated, and it really triggered that, you know, the evidence-based practice. It really triggered that science part of my brain. So I love that. So though I didn't resonate much with the word hypnobirthing, I absolutely 100% understood, you know, that basic anatomy and physiology, and why this stuff works, because it does work. And I mean, it's proven to work. So I love that about it. I also, what were the other things that really drew me to it? Melissa Spilstead, who created the program, she didn't redesign the wheel. She didn't say, this is my teachings. She said, there have been birthing gurus forever. Let's take a bit of this and let's take a bit of that and bring this knowledge into one program. And I love that. And then she added her own flair onto it as well, because I don't believe in reinventing the wheel. I don't think everyone needs to do something different, because there's stuff out there that actually works. So she brought all that together, and I really loved that program. It was really teachable. And the other thing I loved was it wasn't vaginal birth at all costs, because having been at King Eddie's, I know that that's not real life. Birth doesn't always happen like that, and these women need support. Those women who don't get that birth plan, or that, you know, breathe them out and water baby, they are the ones that needed that support now more than ever. So I really love that it was positive birth, regardless of what happened. They had the power to have a positive experience, whether that's the way that they, you know, presented themselves, or their mindset, or their preparation for whatever it was. They were in control of at least that part of their labour and birth. And then the idea of a positive cesarean program just blew me away, because is that not the most discriminated group in birthing ever? They get no antenatal education, none, zero. They don't come to birth classes because they're not birthing a baby traditionally. But that's absolute bullshit. It's bullshit, because they are having a surgical procedure and they're having the birth of their baby. So don't they, more than anyone, need some support as well? So I love that they had the cesarean program. And then they have the Aboriginal program as well, which is just beautiful, because aren't we so lucky in Australia to have the oldest living culture in the world? We should embrace that and celebrate that. And if anyone knows anything about birthing, right, it's our Aboriginals. If anyone knows anything about birthing, it's the Aboriginal Australians. So I really love that we could teach a program that helped facilitate that birthing on country. So then, found my program. You can tell why I love it. It's just phenomenal. And so did my training, and I was teaching in Perth, and I was doing well. I had as many women come to my class as I needed, whilst juggling, you know, part-time work in emergency and part-time work in maternity. And then I had my first baby. And wow, that was an experience, because I had a posterior labour. So thank goodness I already knew this program, because I needed every single tool in my toolbox to navigate that birth. And I dug so deep, and it was the longest labour I ever thought I would ever have. You know, I think it was 3 days of labour, and those 3 days I was the strongest woman ever. Cannot believe the things that I accomplished in those 3 days. And then I went on to agreeing to transfer to hospital, because I was a home birth. And my midwife said, she was confident that I could birth at home, but I think with my obstetric knowledge, I thought, it's been a long labor, my risk factors are going up. So I made the decision to transfer to hospital, and I was comfortable with that. And then being stuck at 8 centimeters, and I didn't have Ginny's optimal maternal positioning under my belt yet. So had I had that, I think perhaps I would have potentially had a different experience. But I certainly did a bit of positioning work. But now in hindsight, I can see some of the things I could have done better. So that's why education is great. So worked hard and agreed to have an epidural because I felt like, I was running out of tools and I was tired. So, hey, let's give that a go. And I did get my posterior baby out, but it was certainly hard work. But I will always celebrate that birth because I've never felt more powerful in my life than when I was roaring that child out. But however, he was a tough baby. So he was not a hypnobub. Hypnobubs traditionally are quite calm and chill. He was not calm and chill. He was a lot of work. So we were not coping in Bunbury. Actually, I was falling in a really dark hole, and I needed the support of my family, and I needed the support of my husband's family. So we decided to uproot and move back to Bunbury. So that's how we ended up back in Bunbury, and my world changed from then because I had the support I needed, so I could claw my way out of that hole. And I think that's where a lot of antenatal programs come unstuck, is that we can teach the birth, and I think that's really powerful. But that postnatal period, it's a very, very hard thing to teach because women aren't focused on that in antenatal classes, and that's what I found. I really felt like birth in hospital classes, birth education had really moved away from labour and birth prep and had focused on that early parenting. But women weren't focused on that bit yet. They needed to get through the birth. So a lot of what went in kind of went out the other side. And I think women needed that real focus on positive birth prep, get them a positive birth, and then start moving forward with that postnatal education. And that, the child health nurse can certainly help with that one. So I didn't realise how tough parenting was going to be. But once I released and let go about the child I thought I was going to have and the postnatal period I thought I was going to have, which was, just going to cafes and drinking coffee and going for runs with my little running pram, and none of that happened. This baby just cried from sun up to sundown, and I had to let go of this idea of Western society that babies need to have routine and just to, put them down to sleep. I had, one side of my parenting that focused a lot on, or one side of my upbringing that focused a lot on that routine and put your baby down. And then I had my other side, which was my in-laws who are from South Africa, and there they wear their babies and they don't put them down and they just hold them and they sleep with them and, all that sort of stuff. So I had quite conflicting kind of parenting models around me, but I had to nurture the baby I had, not the baby I wanted. And so he was held and he was never put down. And once I let go of what I thought parenting was going to be and embraced what my parenting became, then life became a little bit easier. In between that then and my second baby, I worked, same thing again, I worked a little bit in the ED in Bunbury, and I worked a little bit in the maternity unit, and then had Lee, and this is what I get in pregnancy, and so many women will resonate. Oh my gosh, you are so huge. How are you ever going to birth that baby? I'm 5 foot fuck all. That's how big I am, and I weigh nothing. I'm tiny, and I have these massive great bellies, and I think, well, of course it looks big. Where else is it going to go? It's all out in front. There's nothing to me, just baby. And thankfully I've got all this training. So I'm like, why would my baby be big? Why would my baby be so huge that I wouldn't be able to birth him, So I just had confidence in my body that, I didn't have uncontrolled diabetes. I didn't have diabetes at all. I ate well, I was healthy, but I just grew this big baby. Anyway, we get on to the second labour, and I'm all prepared. I'm all prepared for a posterior labour, right? I've got different positioning techniques under my belt. I've got all my acupressure techniques. This child is permanently in a posterior position. So I'm like, right, game on. We'll do this again. I'm okay with that. However, my body had different ideas in mind, and I think I had sub 4-hour labor, breathed him out in the bath, and the midwife said, "Oh, this baby's huge." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, sure, yeah, whatever." And he was 4.1 kilos, so he was pretty decent size, especially for how little I am. I just had the most phenomenal birth, and that was all those tools and techniques I used. But here I am, I've made it home, I'm lactating everywhere, and I'm thinking, why is this education not available in hospitals? Why are we, because I had come to Bunbury and I wasn't going to teach their birth education because I couldn't separate my Hypnobirthing Australia from the, the classes that were run at the hospital, and I just didn't know how to do both. So I was sitting there and I'm thinking, why isn't this is silly. Why isn't this available? And then I'd come across a study by Dr. Kate Yvette, and she did a study on a comprehensive complementary therapy antenatal education program and the effects that has on labour and birth. And 40% reduction, I think, in cesarean sections and a 50% reduction in epidural use. This is based on 2 hospitals in Sydney, hundreds and hundreds of women, and these were the results. And I thought, oh, there it is. This is evidence-based practice. If we're going to be a hospital promoting evidence-based practice, then this is what we need to do. So, the research showed that if you could provide women with an independent, comprehensive complementary therapy antenatal education program, one that encompasses acupressure and positioning and guided meditation and soft touch and all these aspects, as well as the basic birth education, then you would potentially have these effects. And so I got to writing a proposal, and I spent many hours crying because I was lactating and I was in that postnatal period, but also because I thought, I'm writing all this, it's all evidence-based. I'm putting my heart and soul into it, and potentially nobody's going to read it, because this is the government hospital system after all. How much difference can one person make? So I did that, and thankfully Kate Levitt also did a cost analysis. So she released that the following year. So she showed that we could potentially have a 9% savings for the hospitals on each woman birthing. So that's hundreds of thousands of dollars savings a year. So I definitely put that in because, money speaks volumes. So I did all that, and then the most amazing thing happened. I pressed send, and I didn't think I'd hear anything back. Honestly, it was quite a mixed bag of emotions when I pressed send to that email that day. But it was probably about 3 or 4 months later that my manager, Katrina Jones, so she's the maternity manager here at Bunbury Hospital, contacted me, and she said, "It's great. I've raised it up. I've talked to Kate Reynolds, who's the regional manager. She loves it. We're going to go with it. Can we start in 2019?" So this is at the end of 2018. And I just was blown away. I could not believe this was my dream, and it was coming true. And I was finally going to get a chance to launch this. And, the thought was, do we launch this and keep the other classes going? And I said, why? Why would you do that? This is a comprehensive program. This covers everything that they covered, plus some. Plus heaps of some, everything. So you don't need both, you just need one. So, and then I was thinking about, how are we going to, if I just advertise it as Hypnobirthing Australia, I'm only going to get a select few people, because there'll be people out there that have never heard of it. There'll be people out there who think that word's a little bit airy-fairy for them. So I talked to Melissa Spilstead, and I said, how would you feel if I just promoted it as the Positive Birth Program? And she was absolutely okay with that. She was so happy to help us roll it out in the hospital, because Melissa and I have very much the same mentality. It's, this program shouldn't be just for those who can afford it, and it shouldn't be just for those who can access it or know about it or take the time to do the research. Actually, this should be available to everybody, because this makes a difference. So she's been really, really supportive of us rolling it out, which is fantastic. So start of 2019, we rolled out the Positive Birth Program. We rolled out the Positive Caesarean Program. We rolled out the Positive Indigenous Program. And in WA, we don't really have many Torres Strait Islanders. It's mostly just our Aboriginal Noongar people. So I just kind of changed the wording on that to Positive Aboriginal program. And it was really, really successful. So I went to our Southwest Aboriginal Medical Service and I pitched the Aboriginal program to them because I wanted their support. That's often where our Aboriginal women will go for their antenatal care. They loved it so much that they sent one of their midwives off to be trained, and now we've transferred all of the education to them, and they're doing a fantastic job. And then over the course of 2019, we reduced birth interventions across the board for those women who came to the program. So we had a reduction in induction of labour, we had reduction in caesarean sections, we had a reduction in forceps and vacuum deliveries, which is all very great. But the best thing about it is the number of women that got in contact with us postnatally to tell us how amazing their birth was. Now, traditionally, women tend to only tell the negative birth stories, but I had 57% of those women who attended the course contact us back in that time where they're sleep deprived, where they're on a massive learning curve, where there's lots of crazy things going on in their lives. They took the time to contact us back and tell us how amazing their birth was. And these birth experiences ranged from those breathe them out in water babies at home all the way through to, I even had women contact me who had every intervention plus a general anaesthetic for the birth of their baby, still find a reason to be positive about everything that they've done. And that's just the selling point to me. Forget the interventions. I mean, and that's great, but it's those women coming out with that positive experience. So 97% of the women who got in contact with us described having a positive experience. 97%. In a culture where we tend to only get in contact to complain, I feel like that is a phenomenal result. So 97%. And I've got 51 stories, I think, from 2019 of positive birth stories where they've taken the time to actually write out their birth blow for blow so that they can help inspire women. The one person that dropped it down to 97% who had a negative experience was around a caesarean section, and she felt that it was just a surgical procedure. She didn't feel supported. She really wanted to have skin to skin, and that wasn't facilitated. And that was kind of a a resounding story that I'd heard. Positive experience, but would have liked this, would have liked that. So then that launched me into my next drive, which was how can we change this caesarean culture? Because I had come from another hospital in between King Eddie's, and I went to Armidale, which is very family focused. And our babies, as long as they were well, went straight on to mum's chest after a caesarean section, and they stayed there. And they had any assessment they did was there on the chest. Things like weights and measurements happened later up on the ward, like it would be a vaginal birth. So this concept of babies going straight to the resuscitator and not coming to mum was a bit abstract for me. But so I thought, well, I worked with Katrina and we decided to launch a positive caesarean culture change at the hospital, because obviously, you get set in the routine of the things and how they're done. And traditionally caesarean sections were very, very rapid because women had general anaesthetics and you needed to get the baby out as quickly as possible, or otherwise they would have the anaesthetic go to them. But that's not the case anymore. The surgical technique has been much more refined. Certainly anaesthetic techniques are much more refined. So we don't need that speed so much anymore, to the point where, some surgeons are even birthing the baby through the caesarean very calmly, taking their time. In that time, the baby's cord continues to pulsate and they get that delayed cord clamping. And the thought is that if you allow that baby to come through that surgical wound slowly, that potentially some of the fluid will be squeezed out of their lungs. And we know that twice as many babies will go to the neonatal intensive care unit or the special care unit after birth, being born by caesarean section as opposed to a vaginal birth. And that's because of this fluid on the chest. So the idea that could be a positive thing. So I didn't bring that up originally because I thought, let's baby steps. Let's just start with skin to skin, maybe optimal cord clamping, and we will move forward from there. So the things I didn't bring up were that, family kind of cesarean section and the idea of vaginal seeding as well. I didn't talk about that. We brought together a group with an obstetrician representative, a paediatrician representative, a theatre staff representative, an anaesthetist rep. We had a consumer rep. So I had a woman, she's absolutely phenomenal. She had a cesarean when she was a teenager. And she said she felt like a slab of meat at the abattoir. She was told what she would do, when she would do it, and she wasn't a part of the process at all. She was just the vessel for carrying this baby, and I think that's what a lot of women feel. So she had this birth, and then she came to the positive birth program. Sorry, she was hoping for a VBAC. This was 14 plus years later, and she went to an obstetrician with a story. I am a fit and well woman, but she was over 40. So she had some policies and procedures popped over her. She said, but my cesarean was 14 years ago, but she's a VBAC. So she's got these policies and procedures falling over her. So she had a discussion with her obstetrician. I empowered her to go back and talk to him and say, these are the things we've learned. I feel like my risks are this. I would like to try. What do you think? And she had a good conversation, and he wrote a change in management plan. No worries. Happy. Intermittent auscultation as long as you and baby are well. Great. Labour in water, potentially birth in water, depending on how things go. Great. She didn't get to do any of that. She went in for her birth, and baby wasn't coping with the surges. They made the decision together to go for a cesarean section. They dropped the drapes when baby was born. She had delayed cord clamping. She had skin to skin. She said it was the most phenomenal birth that she could ever ask for. So she's gone from this really traumatic cesarean section to a really empowered cesarean section. And even though it wasn't the birth she thought she was going to get, or the one that she discussed, that was okay. It was never about that. It was always about being in control and being the one to make the choices and make the decisions ultimately in the end. So she came along as our consumer rep just to show what a difference birth can be in a cesarean from one attitude to the other. So she had music playing, she had an eye mask, she was involved in her birth. So we decided to start this change in cesarean culture, and cultures take a while to change, but I really feel from the stories that are coming out of Bunbury at the moment that we're making a big difference, which is really exciting. The other thing that Bunbury did was Katrina organised for a redo of our labour wards, because we know that darkness helps facilitate birth. It helps that melatonin release. So they invested in blockout blinds and then privacy blinds as well. So if the women wanted it up, they didn't have any fear that anyone else could see in. So we had that put in. They did floor to ceiling murals, landscape murals. So we've got an ocean room, we've got a forest room, and there's another one I can't think of right now, but just absolutely so beautiful to look at. They've got salt lamps in there, aromatherapy, because this is all evidence-based stuff that makes a difference. So they're really using those as tools. They've got affirmations written in big writing over the walls. So everywhere you look, there's something empowering and inspiring to look at to help you through your journey. So they've done all that. And then when COVID hit, they shut down all our classes. No more face-to-face antenatal classes, they said, which is, it's a safe thing. But suddenly women couldn't have supports that they wanted in labour, because, you could have maybe one to the room. We'll even consider getting rid of that person, so it would just be the woman. And so now more than ever, these women needed support, but suddenly they didn't even have access to basic antenatal education. So I thought, well, stuff that. This program perfectly lends itself to teaching online. In fact, I had taught someone in Sydney. I had once taught someone in Singapore, all via, it was, what was the old platform?
Skype, was it?
Yeah, Skype. Yep. So I used to teach through Skype. Thanks, Andrew. But now Old Skype fan. So I knew it lended itself perfectly. So I said, why not? And why not, why just restrict ourselves to Bunbury? Why not teach the whole of WA Country Health? So my first class online had something like 47 women in it. And I had women from Karratha, Kalgoorlie, Broome, Esperance, Albany, all over WA, and then Bunbury as well. And it was great. And I had women organising, physically distanced coffee dates in the same area. I would even go as far as to say it was probably even more successful than face-to-face. And I really had to eat my words, because I said to my manager when I pitched this, I said, gold standard, face-to-face, as soon as this is all over, we've just got to go back face-to-face. And then I started running these classes, and these couples are in their lounge room and they're cuddled up on the couch with blankets, and they're just eating their dinner or their lunch or snacking when they feel like it. And then the dog trots past and the cat walks past, and then they're cuddling on the couch doing, their relaxation session. I think this is just beautiful. How relaxed are these people? Better than sitting on my plastic chairs all in a line in our classroom. And they're not scared to ask questions, because they're kind of behind a screen, so they can type it, or they can, ask it, or their camera's on, their camera's off. They got the choice of that as well. So they're really uninhibited in what they're asking. And I just thought, actually, this is not a bad way to teach after all. So yeah, that's Andrew. That's where it's come to. My dream now is that it will continue to grow, that we will get the funding to be able to teach practitioners in each of the sites around WA, except that I would like it not just to be midwives, because I understand that in those smaller communities that the midwife's time is very, very precious, and that she really needs to be hands-on with women. So I think, birth workers can teach this program beautifully, because there is an antenatal component to it, and also they can work closely with the midwife, but that would take pressure off the midwives as well. So I'd love to see that. And then, just to roll it out WA Country Health wide, and a part of that would be a program including the optimal maternal positioning, because wow, doesn't that not just make a huge difference? I had a woman in my class before we finished face-to-face, and we were talking about different techniques, and I started showing them the pregnancy routine or the pregnancy protocol, and she'd been told that she got a breech on board. She was approaching 37 weeks. There was really very, very little room in there. They weren't even confident that an external cephalic version was going to be useful, so actually physically turning the baby, which she didn't really want to have anyway. So her and her husband went home. They practiced these stretches twice daily, religiously. They came back a week later or 2 weeks later, and baby had turned cephalic all on his own. And they went on to have a nice spontaneous vaginal birth, where in Bunbury we wouldn't book you in or knowingly facilitate a breech birth. So it would have been cesarean section for them had they not have gone into labour and had their baby. So
wow.
That's my dream. And Ginny is the one that's really inspired me as well, because she talked about, you get everything you want in life and then you leave a legacy. And I really feel like I'm at that stage now where I'm starting to leave a legacy, because this is changing the dynamics in hospitals. Our midwives are walking out of induction of labour going, oh my gosh, she just stood and just breathe through the whole thing. Just absolutely mind blown. And actually, I should have mentioned that as well, Andrew, is that we, as part of all of this, we've been teaching our midwives. So part of the Hypnobirthing Australia program is the supportive caregivers course. So I bring in the midwives. We run a one-day course, which is actually great, because we just end up solving all of the world's problems. So it's really lovely to get like-minded people together and work through some of this stuff. But it really helps them know what to do with these women, because these women come in labour and they're so well supported by the partner that the midwife often feels a little bit on the outside, whereas previously the midwife would be the key support. So teaching them again how to step in to be a team member, maybe with some acupressure or some soft touch massage or the right kind of language that will help facilitate their journey, I reckon that's been the big change as well, because it's these midwives on the floor that are working with the women, that are helping them get through that journey, being a part of that team. So yeah, I look forward to rolling it out.
Wow.
Hopefully that's the dream.
You know what I love, Kasey? I haven't had to ask one question. I've just been sitting in awe of your story.
Sorry.
It's awesome. Yeah, no, don't apologize at all. It's amazing. That's the whole point. It's just it shows, and it's beyond passion. That's what I say. Here's what I want to honor, if I can, and I'll do it in the best way a bloke can do it. It's that it doesn't seem like a righteous fight for you. It's just a true innate belief of what's possible. So I imagine you, when you're typing that email, that letter, and you put everything, I can imagine what went into that when it comes to a government, initiative. I know what dotted I's and crossed T's you would have had to do to that. Maybe the question then is, there's people listening to this, they be doulas, midwives, they be birth workers and birth professionals of everything. You have something that you've learned that's been able to effect change. And maybe they're sitting there thinking, shit, I would love to do this in my hospital. What's your advice? What is your advice
And
to them?
I think, Andrew, I remember being really gobsmacked when Katrina read that. And I think having a supportive manager was my first lucky turn. Obviously, I'd put the work in, but I needed somebody to read it. And she was the one who helped raise it up. So I just mentioned to someone else recently, who was asking about, she had questions about how she could implement something. And I'd said, well, no, why don't you run this program? And she said, oh, it's not supported. And I said, well, maybe you're not taking it to the right person. So I think I've never taken no for an answer. Continue to push. I know this is the right thing. Do you know? I know this is the right thing. So how do we get it implemented into the program? And I love Katrina because she reins me in, for one, because if I had rolled out the positive cesarean culture on my own, we would have done vaginal seeding, we would have done maternal assisted cesarean sections, the whole kit and caboodle would have come out of my mouth. But she's the one that said, let's start slow, because you just implement it a little bit at a little bit, let them get comfortable with that, then push the boundaries. So I need someone like that in my life, to hold me in. And it's the same with, we were writing something for a newsletter recently, and Katrina said, okay, wait for Kasey's response, I'm sure she'll have more. And so I wrote it out and I said, but as Katrina would say, I'm not very good at being succinct, because I can just bang on about this forever. So I'm lucky that I've got someone like that in my life, just to, slow me down a little bit. She's not squashing my dreams. She is helping me raise me up, but she's helping me do it, I guess, the right way, and a way that will affect change. But, simple things like, there's an unspoken rule that you don't just barge into a labouring room, but it doesn't always get listened to. And so at one of our, supportive caregiver courses, we said, what can we do? We need to make this happen, because women need to feel unobserved. Women need to know that door is not going to open unless someone goes and answers it. So no one's just going to barge in. So they will be free to be as primal during birth as they want. And it might take a sign, or it might take a in-service once a week to say, hey, this is what we're doing now. You knock, you wait, you don't enter the room until someone, but you need a champion. So you need a champion to do that. I can't be that champion because I'm already champion in other things at the moment. So if, someone out there thinks, I can make this change, you absolutely can. But it does take work. So you're going to have to keep working at it, keep talking, keep banging on about it. And then eventually it'll start becoming business as usual. And that's when the change happens. But if you first get knocked back, come at it from a different angle. If it gets knocked back again, go to someone else, Something like this, I've done my research. This is all evidence-based. This stuff makes a difference. This is going to save hospitals money. It's going to improve outcomes for mums and babies, and it's going to improve their journey as well. So it's a no-brainer. It's just, how do we make it work?
Yeah, that's awesome. And I'm highlighting that because it's not a fight. That's what I love.
It's a team.
Correct. Exactly. That's what I loved about what you shared. It's not that, we went in and, guns blazing. It's about, how do we do this together?
Yeah, and that's cesarean culture change. It would never have worked if it was just, and it wasn't the midwives driving it, it was the women driving it. They were the leaders, and then we took it on board to help facilitate that, and then we got a team together, because if any of those cogs in the wheel weren't a part of it, it was always going to fall apart. And culture change is hard for anyone, but I think if you just keep chipping away at it and a few key people, eventually people see the benefits, and then like I said, it becomes a no-brainer, and it just happens.
That's awesome. Now, that was advice for midwives, doulas, birth professionals. What's your advice for, maybe there's a primate new mum sitting here listening to that, heard everything you shared, it all resonates, but still has elements of fear. What do you say to them? What do you?
Yeah. Well, knowledge is power. So knowledge is power, and you can't have enough tools. And no, we don't have a crystal ball. We have no idea what's going to happen to your birth. But what you can be is prepared for anything. Yeah, get prepared for anything. So coming along to solid antenatal education, and like I said, an independent, comprehensive, complementary therapy antenatal education program is proven to change outcomes for mums and babies. We know this, the research is there. So, we're lucky in Bunbury because we are the only hospital in Australia who launched this program for absolutely free for our women. So we are very, very lucky. But you can access this kind of education all over Australia, and people balk at the cost, because I used to charge anywhere from $550 to $900, depending on if it was a group class or a private class. That is money well spent. Because here's the thing. You can buy, you can do all the research in the world and buy the best pram for your baby and spend the money on that, and your baby still hates the pram. Like me and my running pram, right? I can still hate the pram. The best thing is I can sell that pram on eBay or on Facebook, and I can make my money back. But you cannot do your birth again. You only get one shot at your birth. So investing in good quality antenatal education will have those benefits, and they're lifelong benefits. And you know that because you've heard so-and-so in the tea room tell you about their traumatic birth, and your mum or your sister or your friends going on about how awful birth is. Well, actually birth doesn't have to be awful at all. Even if you have a range of experiences or interventions or medical conditions, in the end, the actual process of birth can still be really positive. So by coming to a class like this, investing your time, investing your money, can be real. That's a lifelong investment, really. And the tools that you learn in a program like this, they're not just for birth. Like the birth partners learn them as well. These are lifelong tools. It's going to help you navigate parenthood, and certainly those crummy 4-year-olds that don't do anything they're told and test you beyond your wits. You can tell I have a 4-year-old and I'm somewhat tested. These tools will help you navigate that as well. And the millionth thing I love about teaching this kind of education is that the women, so here's a little stat for you. I do a little survey before I start the class, and I ask them, what kind of words would you use to describe birth? And these are the stats I get. 70% of women in 2019 said it would be painful. 50% then clicked scary, so they were the top 2 words, right? And then after the program, the top 2 words, 90% of women said they felt empowered. 60% said strong, 50% then clicked relaxed, and painful and scary dropped down to 10%. So even, it didn't matter then what happened after that. For the rest of their pregnancy, they were excited. And isn't that something? You shouldn't be feeling, in this time we've got beautiful belly and a baby's growing. It's supposed to be a happy, exciting time. And women are terrified about having babies. But after coming to a class, suddenly they're excited again. And that's how birth should be.
Wow. Amazing advice. Kasey, the next podcast will be all about 4-year-olds, if that's okay. It might be a bit longer than an hour though, right?
Don't ask me a lot. Much too raw.
Well, wonderful. I'm so appreciative of your time. I just sit back in awe just listening to all the things that you're implementing. And it touches my heart knowing it's all happening there in Western Australia as well.
We're so lucky. I keep telling the women in the class, you don't know how lucky we are. Like, we have got world-class education, world-class resources at our fingertips. This stuff's making a difference and we get it for free. How lucky are we? Yeah, I keep banging on about that.
That's amazing. For everyone listening to, underneath you'll see all of Kasey's details of how you can get in touch with her. What I'd love to see, and Kasey, I can't wait till you let me know, when there's that midwife in a hospital somewhere in Australia or the world that says, Kasey, how did you do it? And that's when that ripple starts to grow. So I think you're doing amazing things. I've heard all about it before this call, but now I get to experience it firsthand. I think the one thing, I know you already know this, but I'm going to say it, especially as a guy, when I understand how birth can be, especially the world I'm in, right? In all that happens here in Singapore, what Ginny does, I've been exposed to how birth can be. So for me to see anything other than that is quite foreign.
Yeah.
And I'm hearing that you are making that happen, and you're doing it in a medical world. It's pretty phenomenal. So don't take that lightly for a second. And I know you don't need me to say it, but just keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Andrew. And I just a real quick plug for the partners, that they come away from this course completely inspired. And that's what I said, like the midwives have become, a bit hands off, because the support partners, they come away with so much knowledge and so many skills that they've just got this. So they become a driving force in that team. And like you said, very obstetric here, but getting the women to see that the obstetrician is part of her team, the pediatrician is part of her team, the potentially an anaesthetist is part of her team, her midwife, and then her support partner as well. It's all a team, but she is the driving force. She is the one that is in charge, and they're just her professionals that help her if she needs it, to, there for advice and support. Yeah.
Amazing. One final thing, go WA. I love that. Amazing.
Go WA.
Kasey, thank you so much for your time. It was absolutely amazing.
Having me, Andrew.
Wonderful. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you have the voice to empower the birthing world, speak up and reach out to us. We would love to hear from you. Until next time.